The story begins with Jasmine waking up in the same bed with a man she never expected to see. The flower of society, Jasmine Giovanni, was unrequitedly in love with one man, Richard Aion, for 7 years. He was the sword of the empire and the heir of the Duke of Aion. And this man was also the first love of many girls. Jasmine's peers generally adored him, but the only one who liked him was Jasmine. Even despite his impartial composure, which was always with him, never stopped her. The girl always thought that, despite this, she still liked him, but she understood that they would not be together. Richard always stated, no matter what they told him, he did not intend to get married now, because he had more important things to do. As a result, Jasmine was rejected even before she admitted her feelings, which is why she suffered for a long time. Richard told her that if they went any further, she might regret it, so they could stop now. However, the girl was serious, and therefore invited him to sleep with her, and she would forget about what happened. After that night, Jasmine thought she was completely crazy because an adult noblewoman managed to get herself into such a situation. Her eyes were rolling back in her head because she was drunk, and this insensitive man didn't even think about stopping. Suddenly, Richard snuck up on her, pinning her against the door, not allowing her to leave, asking where she was going. A little earlier, the man recalled how the girl said that she loved him, asking if it was a lie. That time, Jasmine turned her head dissatisfied, denying her words, and saying that she could not say such nonsense. But deep down in her soul, she knew that she wanted to own not only the body, but also the feelings, having acquired it completely. Before he lay with her, Richard said that she was so selfish because she still needed proof. And when Jasmine woke up in the same bed with him, she thought in horror how this happened, remembering the evening. Although he looked quite normal, she had too much to drink, which is why she had the courage to offer it to him. Before all these events, Jasmine stood in front of the mirror, asking her personal maid what the problem was. After all, she has golden hair, fair skin, a pretty face. Altogether, she turns out to be the beauty of the empire. And not just a beauty, this sweet face has received recognition from many men, even in this cold society. Then the girl suggested that she had no charm, but the maid tried to convince her otherwise with a smile. However, Jasmine did not back down, wondering if she had a terrible temper, but the maid tried to calm her mistress down. After all, she is the daughter of the venerable Duke Giovanni, and also has a very good reputation in social circles. The maid said that in their state they could not find brides like her, but the girl only sighed heavily. Lowering her head, Jasmine sadly asked what was the use of this, since the 7th year of her unrequited love had already begun. 16-year-old Jasmine Giovanni fell in love at first sight when one day she decided to attend a banquet. That time, at the debutante ball, she first saw the Duke of Aion, who did not smile, despite the celebration. Other girls looked at him with delight, wanting to spend some time with him or go on a date. However, only Jasmine really liked him, even despite his aloofness and composure. During the tea party, the girl said that Duke Aion is so cold, although well-mannered and cool, he is too boring. Another replied that he was very handsome, and she would be nervous every day even if she was in a relationship with him. Another friend of Jasmine, with a smile on her face, said that one can only admire and dream about the Duke. After all, they all had to hear that he openly stated that he had no plans to get married in the near future. It was clear that he was a real narcissist, but she liked him, despite people's conversations and intentions. Another day, Jasmine turned to Marie, saying that she was still trying her best, and she confirmed her words. A brave girl who wanted to become a better person, went in for sports, and even learned to play the piano. The Duke and his wife were then happy to know that their daughter was doing everything to become better in the eyes of society. The maid asked why the Duke of Aion rejected such an ideal woman, but Jasmine did not know what to answer her. Perhaps the reason for this is the cancerous proposal already from the Archduke, whose response came immediately. The letter to Aion said that their meeting with his daughter would undoubtedly be a significant event for both families, but the response, in addition to words of gratitude, said that Richard was not yet ready to enter into a serious relationship. This refusal, like the edge of a knife, greatly angered the Archduke, who was indignant about this for a long time. There was still some turmoil then, but after that day, Marie was the only one who encouraged the lady in this house. The maid replied that she would always be on her side, to which she heard that Jasmine was going to confess to him again. Of course, this man is well aware of her feelings for him, but she has never talked to him about it in person. She was probably afraid that if she received a direct refusal, she would have to admit that it was time to stop. And if this time she is rejected, then she will definitely put her thoughts in order. These words surprised Marie. The excited maid immediately stated that she would support any of her choices. Jasmine knew this, so she smiled. Turning around, the girl asked the maid how she looked today. She answered with surprise that she was incredible. These words instilled confidence in Jasmine, and now she was confident that she could cope with any difficulty. When she came to his estate, full of determination, but before she even had time to confess, she was immediately rejected. Jasmine overheard Richard's childhood friend asking him the real reason he turned her down. But such numbers don't work with her, so she decided to ask directly whether he was still in love with Lily. The guy didn't answer, looking away to the side, seriously thinking about his best friend's question. Jasmine, who had been eavesdropping on them, asked in shock who Lily was and whether Richard was really in love with her. Richard's friend said with a friendly smile that she understood perfectly well how he felt about Lily. However, if something is not meant to be, he needs to pull himself together because there are so many good girls circling around him. The guy asked her to shut up, but she did not let up, hoping that he would quickly forget the love that had passed. He would put pressure on Lily with his behavior if he continued in the same spirit. Richard knew this, so he asked her to shut up. Jasmine was surprised, because it was the first time she had seen the Duke throw such rude words at someone. The girl decided that she and the princess were very close, so they could take some liberties in this regard. But next to her he was always icy, although he could have at least shown her the other, living side of himself. Richard continued to be pressed, asking if he was annoyed by the fact that this was true, and no one would tell him this. Scratching his head, the guy said that she was not entirely right, which caused a surprised look in his direction. The stunned girl asked if a heartless guy like him had any other friends besides her. Richard replied that Crown Prince Gillian asked him about his engagement to the Archduke's daughter. It would be nice if, as Duke of Aion, he acquired strong and close ties with the Archduke. However, the guy said that he refused because he was not confident enough that he was ready to start a family. With a malicious smile, the friend decided to ask if he is attracted to this girl, although he does not show it. Jasmine listened carefully, hoping to hear what Richard was hiding behind his mask of equanimity. But the guy shook his head, asking who he was to evaluate her, because she was an outstanding noble lady. Jasmine thought that this person really wasn't the least bit interested in her, which made her feel sad. The girl in the red uniform said that she had a bad character and a sweet face, and people replace people. Richard replied that he knew about it, but the main problem was that nothing good would come of it. He then added that she was a flower that belonged in a beautiful garden, but not next to a person like him. This can be understood only by looking at Leovani's biography and the love that reigned in their family, which is rare. Turning his gaze to the window, the guy concluded that he was not a match for her, no matter how much he wanted to, and no matter how much he thought about it. Jasmine, hearing his every word, could not believe that the one for whom she was becoming better had rejected her. Richard's friend grinned, realizing that there was no point in continuing the conversation further, so she decided to leave him. Before she could say goodbye, she turned around abruptly, asking if he knew that Lily was getting married soon. Without looking up from the window, the guy answered in the affirmative, adding that this would definitely need to be noted. The girl did not understand whether this was said seriously, but he did not give an unambiguous answer, which means he himself did not know. When the door closed behind the guy, he grabbed his head, saying that unrequited love is very painful. But he didn't even realize that a couple of meters away from him stood the same girl who thought exactly the same thing. After a while, her brother and the maid stood in front of Jasmine's chambers, asking if she would come out to them again today. The guy with a smile on his face decided to joke and said that he would soon forget what his sister looked like. He then turned to the maid, asking if she had been acting like this since she went to confess to this idiot. Having received an affirmative answer, the guy clarified that he had rejected her, and the concerned maid confirmed this too. James shouted that no matter what, you can't lock yourself in four walls. The maid supported him. Suddenly, the guy decided that she urgently needed to cheer up, asking her to prepare Jasmine for a walk. With enthusiasm in her eyes, the maid agreed to do whatever it took to give her mistress some relief. She continued to try to reach Jasmine, but she, in turn, irritably asked to leave her alone. The girl mentally asked if it was not clear that she was healing the wounds of unhappy and unrequited love. However, the maid did not give up, and practically demanded the mistress to open the doors for her, trying to be friendly. Suddenly, after a couple of seconds, the doors opened, and Jasmine asked why she kept getting on her nerves. The maid, concerned, replied that she had not left her room for several days and had not even touched food. Explaining that things wouldn't work that way, the maid grabbed the mistress by the shoulders, inviting her to get ready for a walk. When asked what kind of walk they were talking about, Marie replied that James said he wanted to please her a little. A couple of hours later, her brother asked to say hello to his younger friend at the academy, Duke Richard. The girl looked at the guest in shock, unable to say a word, while James introduced his sister to him. The guy didn't even know about their true relationship, so he politely asked to greet each other. Taking her hand, Richard greeted Lady Leavanny, adding that they had not seen each other for a long time and that she was beautiful. Jasmine was surprised by the encounter, and a look of confusion appeared on her face as he politely kissed her hand. If you think about it like that, he's not even interested in her, but he still showers her with such compliments. Smiling, Jasmine thanked him, trying not to show what she really felt deep down. She then said that this was their first meeting since the celebration that was held at the end of the year before last. The guy agreed with an indifferent look, remembering that then they even danced together and had a nice conversation. James joined the dialogue, saying that he also remembered their dance. It was as if copied from a picture by a great artist. When suddenly he said that they were just an ideal couple, the sister looked in surprise at his naive face. But the guy continued to talk about them as if nothing had happened, while Jasmine tried to understand why he was behaving this way. Some time later, they sat at the table, drinking tea, James and Richard chatting about everything and nothing. During their dialogue, Jasmine kept her eyes on her brother, trying to understand the motives of his actions and words. If she were her brother, she would seriously think that she was not going to give up even after being rejected. It was hard not to notice that she was in love with the Duke, but now it was time to stop, because it would not change anything. The girl noticed that he didn't even look at her, and every time he tried to look away somewhere to the side. But the worst thing was that he loved another woman, and she had no right to interfere with their relationship. Suddenly, James stood up and said that he would go and fetch the adjutant and bring the missing documents. He asked Richard to take care of his little sister, to which he agreed, and a slight smile flashed on his face. Jasmine whispered to her brother to stay, asking where he was going and leaving her alone with him. Giving her a thumbs up, James mentally asked his sister to cheer up while he was away. The girl mentally asked him to understand the hints, because she was going to end this unrequited love. Despite requests not to leave her here alone, James nevertheless left, after which there was an awkward silence. With her head down, the excited girl tried to figure out what to do now and where to start the conversation. While she was thinking about this, Richard decided to address her first, saying that he wanted to tell her something. At first, Jasmine was confused, but in a second she collected her thoughts, tucking a curl behind her ear, ready to listen. The guy said he couldn't beat around the bush, especially when it came to such serious things. With a straight face and carefully chosen words, he said that he was not good enough for her. It seemed to her that she already knew what he wanted to say, looking at his hands folded as if in alarm. Through a sweet smile, Jasmine mentally asked him to stop and shut up, because she didn't want to hear it. However, Richard continued, saying that what he wanted to tell her was about marriage between families. Although he had already written about this in a letter, he decided that it would be much more polite to tell her this straight to her face. The girl understood that these were just polite manners, but now they were of no use. It would be hard for her to hear these words. She remembered how one of her friends said that he looked like a sweetheart, but in reality he was boring and rude. Another agreed, adding that he is very private and so tactless that he says things he shouldn't. Jasmine immediately jumped up, trying to calm her friends down, asking if they thought there was something wrong with the Duke. She tried to convey that he was only a well-bred man. Moreover, he was many times better than many rude people. She was told that this was true, but she must understand that more than one woman shed tears because of his attitude. Interrupting Richard's speech, Jasmine said that he was very polite. The guy was surprised to hear such words. It would be better if he just ignored it as usual and didn't have to state the fact again. He wanted to answer her something, but the girl interrupted him again and added that from now on she would not bother him. Trying her best to smile, Jasmine said that she didn't think he hated her so much. She didn't even imagine that she had behaved so tactlessly towards him, without noticing it. When she sent a marriage proposal, I don't know him, it's true. He was upset then and refused in a rude manner. But she still did not lose hope until she saw him nervously sipping tea. She did not even know that he hated her. Jumping up from his seat, Richard apologized and shouted loudly that he had no intention of hurting her feelings. She asked him to stop, adding that from now on she would not disturb him. She then excused herself, deciding to get as far away as possible before he noticed the tears slowly running down her cheeks. Richard wanted to stop her, but immediately froze, deciding that such an act could only make the situation worse. Jasmine was a truly happy girl who had delicious treats and romance novels. Being surrounded by a friendly and loving family, Jasmine was most interested in what snacks were waiting for her tomorrow. It was her wonderful and carefree life, in which there was no place for sadness and sorrow for unrequited love. But after their meeting, the girl, being in her chambers, screamed loudly that it was all Richard's fault. After all, it was after their meeting that everything turned upside down, and her life will never return to its previous course. Crying into her pillow, she thought that it would be good if he were not interested in that girl. Bursting with tears, Jasmine thought that she also didn't want to love him anymore, but this feeling was not easy to suppress. The next day, drinking tea in the company of her brother, the girl sighed heavily, irritating James a little. Unable to bear it, the guy asked if she needed anything, but the girl, hugging the teddy bear, replied that it was nothing. Looking at his sister's condition, James clenched his fist tightly, thinking that Richard Aion was to blame for all this. Although he was a combination of mastery of both a pen and a sword, with pleasant appearance, he still offended Jasmine. Even in comparison with him, the captain of the state knightly order, he is impeccable, but not in everything. After all, he is the perfect match for his sister, but now she is in a terrible state because of him. James shouted that that's what he thought, and he had the feeling that girls don't understand guys at all. Then he decided to find out what was wrong with their Jasmine, but the girl tucked her knees under her without answering. The guy tried to cheer her up, saying that she was the only beauty they had, although now, however, she was a little out of sorts. No matter her appearance, her character is much more important, because she is such a kind, sweet, and sensitive girl. In a dissatisfied and resigned voice, Jasmine asked if he was joking, after which she asked him to tell it like it is. James thought she was angry, even though she had been acting demure and calm for the past few years because of the Duke. But before she was a very active and restless child, doing various pranks for fun. Suddenly, the girl turned to her brother, which made him flinch, listening carefully to what his sister would say to him. She said he was right, clutching her teddy bear at the same time, adding that Richard Aion was a scoundrel. Sharply looking at James with a menacing look, Jasmine suddenly announced that she wanted to meet a man. A few days later, they decided to attend a masquerade ball, where the girl decided to find a companion. Having dressed up, she and James walked around the hall, while he asked her if this was a deliberate decision. The girl replied that the masquerade ball is an anonymous event, so you can easily meet someone here. It's been so long since she's been to an event like this that it's awkward, but it does evoke a hint of nostalgia. At that same second, a friend named Nikki approached her, with a smile on her face, immediately recognizing Jasmine under the mask. The girl didn't expect to see her here, which made her feel awkward, and then asked what she was doing here. Nikki replied that she reads her thoughts, and Jasmine is here because her beloved Duke of Aion came here. In response to this, the girl saw her friend's irritated look, and James was afraid that his sister would lose her temper. Jasmine replied that she no longer had feelings for him. Her brother added that Nikki should be more careful with her words. But the blue-eyed girl immediately switched to James, who politely greeted his sister's friend, after which they began to exchange compliments among themselves, while Jasmine stood between them. When she got tired of listening to this, she looked at Nikki with a menacing look, hinting to her that it was time to stop. She suggested that Jasmine had to come here to meet someone new, to take her mind off Richard. Nikki whispered that she should have come alone, because no one takes their brother with them to a dating place. Suddenly, she announced that she would take care of Mr. Karras, and she could go and experience all the delights of the night festivities. Jasmine did not have time to fully understand the essence of her friend's words, which is why she tried to stop them, but to no avail. At that second, a man in a black mask was watching the girl, slowly sipping champagne and not taking his eyes off her. Jasmine thought that it was unlikely that they did this for her sake, but she would still act as she was told. She decided to do everything if it would help her forget the Duke, so she needed to relax and have a pleasant evening. After wandering around the hall alone for a while and drinking wine, the blushing girl thought that now she could live. Noticing James and Nikki, Jasmine thought it was good that no one would disturb her while she was drinking. But at that very second, her brother drew attention to her, hinting with a stern look that she should drink in moderation. Turning away, she thought that this infuriated her because she was already an adult, and she herself knew how much to drink. Then she noticed Richard dancing with some lady. I don't know how she must feel. Going out onto the balcony and leaning on the railing, the girl bowed her head, saying that she felt absolutely rotten. Raising her head, she sighed, deciding that she had drunk too much and needed to breathe a little. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice. Turning around, Jasmine noticed a guy who asked if she was okay. When asked who he was, the guy answered ambiguously that he was a man who was fascinated by a beautiful butterfly. With a surprised and dismissive expression on her face, the girl replied that she was not interested in him and asked him to leave. The guy did not back down, noticing that she was drunk, which is why he asked permission to accompany her, but she refused. As soon as Jasmine said that she could take care of herself, at that very second she tripped, dropping her glass. She noticed too late that she would not have time to catch the vessel, which would put herself in a bad light. Lowering her head, she noticed a broken glass and the hem of her dress, on which wine stains were clearly visible. The stranger wanted to help her, extending his hand, but she threw it away and declared that there was no need for this. Looking at him with a pleading look, Jasmine asked the stranger to just leave and not disturb her. However, this only provoked the guy more, who said that he still came here to have fun. Then he suddenly rushed forward, grabbing Jasmine by the shoulder, and simultaneously said that she looked very cute. When suddenly, another man grabbed his hand, calmly declaring that he had an appointment with this girl. A few minutes later, Jasmine said that everything was fine, asking her to stop following her, but was refused. Richard said that she was drunk, so he would personally escort her to the carriage so that nothing else would happen. Smiling slightly, the girl asked that apparently he was free today, calling him a handsome duke. Turning around, Jasmine said that at first he hated her to death, and then offered to accompany her to the carriage. Richard did not expect that the girl would remind him of this now, which is why he was confused, not knowing what to say. He wanted to say that there was a misunderstanding, but Jasmine decided to talk since the conversation had already started. In her entire life, this is the first time she has encountered such treatment from a man she likes. She didn't know how much he hated her, so she asked why she put so much pressure on him. After all, when Jasmine is next to him, she feels the most pathetic and helpless in the world. Well, for some reason, of course, he doesn't care. The flower hurts so much when she was offended, but tramples him with her feet, and he doesn't even imagine how much the flower loves him, and cannot respond to this love in any way. After crying, the girl added that he did not know what suffering the flower suffered because of his attitude. Richard calmly lowered his head, answering that he knew that, and then apologized to her. Covering her face with her hands, Jasmine sobbed, saying that it would be better if he were an immoral person. Suddenly, she felt dizzy, and the guy who noticed this began to ask if she was okay. Jasmine felt her head begin to spin, and she didn't notice how she leaned on Richard. He did not expect such a turn of events, and now he looked at the girl who had fallen to his chest. 7 years ago, at the Imperial Academy, Jasmine was walking down the street, unable to sleep due to her nerves. Hugging herself with one arm, the girl thought that tomorrow she and Mr. Richard would become a little closer. She remembered using James as an excuse to visit him. She suddenly had the idea of asking him to stay for a second year, but that would be too cruel. When suddenly she heard a rustling not far from her, she turned around and asked herself who was walking here at such a time. Hiding behind a tree, the worried girl thought that robbers had entered the territory. She noticed 2 guys standing by the fence, shouting to someone that there was no one here and they could climb over. At that same second, their third comrade, who turned out to be Duke Aion, climbed over the fence. Jasmine was dumbfounded and never expected to see her lover at night near the academy. As he jumped off, the guy asked if they wanted rumors to spread that someone had climbed over the wall. His friend apologized, after which he heard the question of what they were going to drink if they had to go all the way here. His friend was in no hurry to answer the question, taking out a cigarette and saying that if they were caught, they would deduct points. Handing the cigarettes to Richard, he added that it was not they who were risking their lives, but he, the Duke's son. Unlike them, who were expelled, he, the future Archduke, came here to study, setting an example for others. Richard replied that if he was going to talk nonsense, he should give it up, after which he reached for a cigarette. The friend said that it sounded very rude, but he helped the guy light a cigarette by bringing the match closer. Jasmine was shocked to think that academy students were not allowed to smoke, and besides, he said that he had been drinking. Meanwhile, friends asked how things were going with that widow Riche, but another asked how about Joanna. Richard responded in an irritated manner that it was not what they thought, and they were not on that kind of terms with them. His friends were surprised, saying that they had so much hope, receiving a reproachful look in response. One of his comrades asked why Richard looked so dark, because such a look makes him scared. "Throw away the cigarette." The guy replied that he doesn't do anything for which he cannot take responsibility. One of the guys asked if what he does with them every night while he's here isn't responsible. When asked if this was the act of a scumbag, Richard replied that if no one found out, then no one would get hurt. With a sly smile on his face, he added that you just need to not get caught, and then everything will be fine. Jasmine was surprised by his last phrase that day, completely unable to believe that it was her lover who said it. When the girl tried to open her eyes, she heard Richard asking him to prepare a carriage for his mistress. She felt a sharp headache, causing her to close her eyes again, trying to come to her senses again. Richard, who was holding her in his arms, asked worriedly if she had woken up, but the girl did not answer. Someone told the guy that the carriage was already on its way. At that very second, Jasmine embarrassedly declared that he was a scoundrel. He asked the girl what she meant, but she only repeated what she had said, covering her face with her hands. Then Jasmine asked to leave her and leave, because this help was enough, but Richard refused. She is the younger sister of his friend, and he cannot leave her to the mercy of fate in this condition. And for his part, he will try to avoid random meetings with her as much as possible, so as not to cause discomfort. Still intoxicated, the girl said that he was a scumbag, and then asked him to let her go. Richard asked if she had always had such a character, to which he received another request to put her on the ground. Putting her down, the guy said that she was far from being the flower of society, because she looked more like a toadstool. Jasmine replied that he was pretending to care about her, when in reality he didn't care. She added that she knew his creepy obsession with politeness was just an act, because his image of the perfect gentleman cannot be undermined, and he must hide behind a mask. Richard smiled spontaneously, asking if she meant that being polite was bad for others. Giving him the same smile, the girl concluded that now his true face was in front of her. Returning his indifferent expression, Richard replied that he was not stupid enough to be nice to rude people. The girl replied that old habits were making themselves felt, and she knew that he used to like to have fun. The guy didn't fully understand what she meant, because he didn't know that Jasmine was watching them that time. He had been a scumbag for about a year. She remembered this after looking at his smiling expression. With a malicious smile, the girl quoted him, saying that if no one finds out, then no one will get hurt. Memories immediately came flooding back to Richard, whose eyes widened in surprise as he looked at Jasmine. After the incident with Richard's trick, James asked where Jasmine was going in such a way for the night. Visibly nervous, the girl replied that she was going for a walk. Thank you for Richard's success at the academy. Taking off his cloak, the guy replied that he was impeccable. His scores were excellent, and he was dressed like a needle. He will speak at the upcoming graduation ceremony as a student representative. Brother mentioned that he also gave a speech last year, but Jasmine replied that she didn't ask. Having given her a slap on the forehead, James said that if she didn't want to nod off at the presentation, she should go to bed. With a smile on his face, he wished her good night. I hope his sister doesn't do something strange. The next day, Jasmine's thoughts at the graduation ceremony were occupied with Richard. He gave a speech, and on behalf of the students, I would like to congratulate the senior comrades and teachers, and also all those who decided to devote themselves to a bright future and empire, after which he finished his speech. Jasmine thought that if studying is too hard for a student, he can allow himself to relax. She didn't know if people could be perfect, but she was aware of what that perfect person was hiding. At the time, she thought this because she was in love with him, but now things have taken a different turn. Jasmine said she has no idea about the others, but at least she knows about it. Pointing her finger at the guy, the girl gloatingly stated that she knew that he was far from ideal, as he wanted to seem. Looking at Richard's surprised face, she hoped that he would get angry and tell her what he was thinking. However, everything did not go according to plan, and now she looked surprised, looking at Richard with a blank expression. He covered his face with his palm and then burst into laughter, which made Jasmine freeze in confusion. The girl didn't understand why he was laughing, at first deciding that he was so annoyed that he was going crazy. Suddenly, a carriage drove up to them, and the coachman said that they had prepared it for the lady, as the master had asked. Standing behind the girl, Richard said that it was time for her to return home, because it was already too late. He was laughing like crazy now, and in an instant he assumed a serious expression on his face, as if nothing had happened. Jasmine watched him carefully, but now there was not a hint of a smile on his face. She said that she was on her way, so she asked to let go of her hand. Someone replied that he wanted to accompany her to the carriage. Jasmine tried to understand why he wasn't angry, because he should have at least asked her not to spread rumors. It was also surprising that he was not interested in how she knew this. At that very second, Richard turned to her. The girl realized that he was still curious, but she could easily explain everything and get out of the situation. But contrary to her thoughts, Richard calmly declared that from now on it would be nice if she drank in moderation. He then added that she could get into trouble while unconscious. Coming a little closer, Richard whispered that then her honor would be at risk, and she did not need that. Turning around, the guy said that it was time for him to return, after which he wished the girl a good evening. Finally, he gave her a slight grin, leaving the surprised girl standing alone near the carriage. Suddenly, she shook with indignation, after which she loudly screamed that Duke Aion was a vile bastard. On the way home, Jasmine recalled that they had bumped into each other the night before the graduation ceremony. 1 year apart, in the same place, at the same time, she hid again, watching the three guys. For Jasmine, this was a fatal coincidence, because she did not expect to hear what Richard would say. The guy calmly announced that he was going to war. His comrades replied that he had health problems. Richard explained that an armed conflict with Descartes suddenly began 3 days ago, and there would be an announcement tomorrow. Then he added that it was time to stop being willful, and therefore they should go back. That smiling expression looked strangely lonely and gloomy. She returned to the room and began to cry. After graduating from the academy, Richard performed any job perfectly, and distinguished himself not only on the battlefield, but even after returning from the war as a hero, he was able to receive many awards for his efforts for the sake of the empire. She loved watching him develop and become a better person, rising in the eyes of other people. Then Jasmine firmly decided that she wanted the same thing, and perhaps next to him she could also become a better person. But then, lying in her bed, she no longer cared about love and other nonsense that she was thinking about. 3 days after the masquerade ball, Richard and his girlfriend went hunting, tracking down deer. A deafening shot was heard, but the bullet flew past the animal, which is why it got scared and ran away. However, she was not upset, and said with a smile that the mood was still wonderful, most likely due to the weather. However, the guy could not answer in kind, sadly lowering his head, crossing his arms over his chest, barely audibly agreeing. The girl frowned, calling out to her friend, and then asked if he would continue to be sour. Handing over the weapon to the servant, she stated that even she would now fall into depression, looking at his appearance. Approaching Richard, she displeasedly asked why he was so lost, asking him to tell him everything. At first, the girl assumed that he had a hangover, because yesterday she left earlier, and he could drink without her knowledge. Hearing a negative answer, she did not back down, deciding to find out the true reason for what happened yesterday. Continuing to try to get the guy to talk, he covered his mouth with his palm, not knowing how to answer her correctly. Hearing a heavy sigh, the girl decided that something bad had really happened to Richard yesterday. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise when she saw that the guy took a cigarette out of his pocket. Raising her tone, Naiza asked why he smokes, because he gave up this habit when the war ended. Pointing her finger at him, she asked if he had problems, asking him to tell it like it is, without hiding anything. After taking a long drag, Richard asked if he was really so arrogant, thereby silencing the girl. After a couple of seconds, she smiled nervously, answering that, to be honest, everything is as he says. Why did the girl ask if he thought a guy like Richard would be even the least bit friendly? Sitting down on the grass next to the guy, she added that he himself knows that this is true, and now she is fed up with it. However, Nisa became very interested in why he decided to ask her such a question out of the blue. At that second, a vivid image of Jasmine, who had her back turned to him, flashed through Richard's head. Then he replied that yesterday he had a fight with someone. Closing his eyes, his friend asked who he had a fight with. When she heard the name Jasmine Liavani, her eyes immediately widened, and her face was filled with silent surprise. She looked at her friend in shock, loudly asking why they had a fight and how it happened. Without answering verbosely, Richard said that somehow everything worked out on its own, and he himself did not fully understand. Nisa noticed that he had been talking about her often lately. The guy replied that he had mentioned her only twice. The girl clarified that as much as 2 times, this is already a lot. It even looks like a record if you don't count the conversations about Lily. And judging by his behavior, she can assume that Richard managed to quarrel with her very strongly. Naiza then stated that she could find out everything even if he remained silent, although now he looked worried. Shaking off the ashes, Richard replied with a barely noticeable smile that one way or another, she hit the bull's eye. After all, he cannot understand how many feelings and emotions it takes to hate a person with whom he is unrequitedly in love. Naiza asked what she said to make him have such thoughts, and these words were sharper than they seemed. The guy replied that the toadstool suited her much better than the flower, to which he heard the question whether this was cruel. But, in other words, it hurt him very much. If he doesn't want to accept it, then he should just ignore it. She wasn't the first person to harbor such hatred towards him, so he had to get used to it. At that same second, Jasmine's words flashed through the guy's head when she said that she knew a lot about him. He then said that she was the first person who could convince him that he could not always be right. At the same time, while in her mansion, Jasmine loudly declared that she was now very angry with Richard. Nikki and Marie listened as the girl asked why she always fell in love with such arrogant idiots. Now she was furious, and now she admires nothing about him. Her friend only calmly agreed. Putting a cup of tea on a saucer, Nikki said that now it was time for her to stop suffering from unrequited love. Self-flagellation is enough, but a real woman of their time never looks back. The friend decided to do her duty and urged Jasmine to get up, adding that the world was full of men. Looking at her friend's tear-stained face, Nikki literally ordered this arrogant idiot to be erased from her memory. Rising from bed, Jasmine realized that Nikki was absolutely right, and there would be no trace of Richard left in her. With a determined look, the girl replied that she was ready to go and erase her dark history, starting a new path. A few hours later, they decided to attend another celebration so that Jasmine could carry out her plan. Their friend, with dark hair, said that in the modern world, it is stupid to look at only one man. Nikki agreed, saying that there are a lot of outstanding guys around, and everyone needs to be tasted. At that same second, Aisha, another friend, approached them, addressing Nikki with a sweet smile. Without thinking twice, the girl asked if it was she who said that she was going to devote her heart to James. The friend replied that there was still a lot of love in her, so she decided to give him some, so there's no need to worry. And since we are talking about this, she wants to suggest going in search of someone to whom Aisha will dedicate her love. Deciding that this was a good idea, both girls immediately began to leave, notifying their two remaining friends. Jasmine said that recently everyone has been studying abroad and preparing to inherit the title. Therefore, she is glad to get together like this for the first time in a long time. The brunette replied that this is their advantage. Aion then asked with a friendly smile what Jasmine wanted to do, calling her cute along the way. Lowering her head, the girl blushed slightly, answering that she didn't know, because she was not used to spending time like that. Aion said that she can do whatever she wants, because now she can no longer restrain herself. This statement inspired Jasmine, because she had previously lived within limits in order to please Richard. The friend did not back down, asking how she viewed taking over secular society into her own hands. In this country, members of the imperial family are the only women who were nobler than her. However, they are not at all interested in connections, which is why they prefer to hunt rather than feast. Or, like those people, they meet with anyone at random in order to relieve the boredom of what is happening around them. Aion smiled, declaring that it was best to replace a past love with a completely new person. Pointing her finger at Jasmine's nose, she added that no matter how bad it was, the mood would improve anyway. Suddenly, their dialogue was interrupted by a familiar voice that called out to them, forcing them to pay attention. It was Aisha who was heading towards them, smiling widely, at the same time asking them to look in her direction. When Jasmine saw her friend next to her, she immediately asked what it was, deciding that she was up to something. Aisha asked her to look towards the wall near which Nikki was standing. There was a lonely guy there. Jasmine noticed a guy with ashen hair, and her friend beamed, asking if she liked him. After all, he never stops looking sideways at her, even though they are standing right in front of him and can see everything. Aisha assumed that he was interested in Jasmine, but the girl herself was surprised by such thoughts. When suddenly this guy looked straight into her eyes, pretending in surprise that it happened by accident. He then looked away in embarrassment, confirming Aisha's theory, surprising Jasmine. Aion, hiding her lips behind her fan, said that this was the second son of the Marquis Alexander, and his name was Charles. His friends unanimously said that he has a good face and body, and his reputation is quite good, which suits Jasmine. Aion added that he also inherited property from his maternal relatives, which is good. Sharply closing her fan, the girl declared that Jasmine deserved much more, thereby surprising her. Aisha said that he is not particularly eye-catching, but an easy relationship for practice would not hurt her now. Taking a sip of champagne, Jasmine thought that Aion was right, and she could really try her luck. Suddenly, she noticed that Charles began to slowly walk towards her, smiling nervously and awkwardly. Jasmine smiled back, thinking that there was nothing better than erasing old and unpleasant memories. A few days later, she sat near the fountain, lost in her thoughts, waiting for one person. Suddenly, the girl turned her head, hearing a familiar voice calling on her to pay attention. Charles approached her, noticing with a smile that she had arrived first, after which he handed her a bouquet of flowers. The guy asked if she would accept him, because he himself prepared this bouquet for the lovely lady. Smiling, Jasmine was pleasantly surprised by the young man's manners, answering that these flowers were very beautiful. Then she thanked the guy, showing him all her politeness and upbringing in order to look even more beautiful. Her impulsively started affair with Charles is not to say that it was very bad, but there were also nuances. First, she spent her whole life chasing one guy, and then she is courted by another man who has an interest. If we talk about Jasmine's feelings for Charles, it was only an ambiguous infatuation, but definitely not love. Charles is always so affectionate and well-mannered, and also such a sweetheart when he's shy, and now she loves it. While she was thinking about this, the guy apologized. Turning to her, she looked questioningly at the gentleman. He decided to ask if she would like to take a walk with him to the lake on his estate next time. Jasmine asked how far it was to the place outside the capital that he spoke about earlier. Charles replied that it was located near the capital, so the journey would take a quarter of a day, and asked not to worry. Jasmine, who always only looked at difficult guys, felt very at ease with Charles. Smiling, the girl replied that she would not refuse his offer and would be very glad to take a walk with him. Jumping up from his seat, the guy said that this was great news and he would be a good escort. One evening, during which another ball was taking place, Richard walked along the second floor, thinking about something. At that same second, a smiling Naisa approached him, joyfully greeting her friend and asking if he was leaving. Having heard an affirmative answer, she said that she had heard that the military leadership was squeezing all the juice out of him. Remembering his father's words, the guy replied that he was under more pressure to talk about marriage than about work. He understands that the sooner he gets married and starts a stable family, the sooner he can retire. With a malicious grin, the girl asked how he tolerated all this, although she herself had glued her flippers together a long time ago. But Richard is so busy, and they don't want to put themselves in his position because he doesn't even really sleep and works. Naisa also said that his assistant was very worried about him and was not afraid that he might overwork. The guy replied that he, as the head of the family, had to work hard, but he could not finish the proposal. A purple butterfly flew before his eyes, while Naisa asked him not to strain himself. Having not heard an answer, the girl turned to her friend again, asking if he was listening to her at all. Richard suddenly announced that his excellent memory for trifles prevents him from living a carefree life, which surprised Naisa. Then he drew attention to the huge crowd of guests that had gathered on the ground floor in the courtyard. The girl said that lately there have been parties almost every day. This is the month of high society. Every open area in the imperial palace is filled with aristocrats, and they could join them. After all, when else can they rest if not at such moments, so now they can go and unwind. He suddenly stopped when he heard someone address Charles, saying that he was dating Jasmine. While Nisa asked him what was wrong, Richard listened as they talked about Jasmine as the flower of society. Turning his head, the guy noticed two guys who were happily talking with the embarrassed Charles. The girl said that this is the second son of the Marquis Alexandra. Apparently, he is now dating Lady Leovanni. Richard tried to imagine the couple together, reasoning out loud that they were not suitable for each other at all. But before she had time to speak, Naisa said the exact opposite, rejoicing for the newly made couple. She added that Jasmine has been participating in all the activities lately and has sorted out her feelings for Richard. Let's say the guy answered that it no longer had anything to do with him, but the girl didn't believe it. Suddenly, he heard one of the guys ask how Charles was coping with her rather strong character. He replied that she is very caring towards others, so he thinks that he is very lucky to have her. They immediately told him that he was naive and could be mistaken, but Charles immediately began to deny everything, waving his hands. Nisa said that because she was in love with Richard all this time, everyone is interested in her love life. Her friend said they were like hyenas gathered around a piece of meat, so he didn't take their words seriously. The girl suggested that he relax, ask why he was so angry, but the guy began to deny it. Frowning and smiling slightly, Naisa stated that he was acting very suspiciously by saying such things. Why did they hear Charles say that he invited Jasmine to take a walk by the lake near his estate? Naisa was surprised that they were already visiting each other, noticing fairly rapid progress in the relationship. Richard said that only a month had passed, but the girl did not understand what exactly he wanted to say with this phrase. A man who is unrequitedly in love with another person, Richard understood Jasmine's feelings very well. He wondered if he had acted too rudely with a man who was in exactly the same position as himself. Because of this, he felt guilty, but was she too quick to deal with her feelings for him? Richard thought that her feelings for him were so insignificant that they could be broken in just 1 month. Turning around, the guy said that he was tired and would go to rest. Naisa invited him to listen to the rest of the conversation. However, he suddenly ignored her, after which the girl began to think that Richard had been very strange lately. A few days later, while in the carriage, Charles said that their territory was famous for its wine. Jasmine, who was sitting opposite him, radiated joy and interest in the conversation, listening carefully to the guy. Charles spoke nonstop, deciding to mention one of the distinctive features, but the girl thought that she was tired. He talked endlessly only about his own things, which made being in his company very boring. Jasmine understands that he is a good person, but that is all, and she does not feel anything serious about him. Closing her eyes, she thought that she wanted to go home as soon as possible to play cards at home with her brother and relax. Suddenly, the guy said that he has a lot of hunting grounds on his territory, and Richard often hunts there. Jasmine thought that they had not encountered him at all lately, remembering his last promise. Then he said that he would try not to intersect with her, and it turns out that he avoids her company on purpose. Suddenly she raised her head, not understanding why she even started thinking about it, because it was even for the better. She hopes that she will not see him for 6 months, or maybe even more. Charles was surprised at her behavior. Suddenly she asked out loud if Richard thought there were plenty of beauties like her, but he would regret it. She then stated that for the rest of his life, he would swing a sword, look at boring papers, and be covered in wrinkles. Looking at the girl's indignation, which appeared out of the blue, the guy tried to understand what she was talking about. A few days later, Jasmine met with Richard at the next ball, when suddenly they were distracted by a woman's voice. Crown Princess Reina said the wine tasted great today, asking Jasmine if she liked it. A girl with dark long hair and violet eyes looked carefully at the guest. After a couple of seconds of thought, the girl tried to answer that she hadn't really had a chance to taste the taste yet. However, her answer was interrupted by Richard, who asked the Crown Princess if he would accept her as a companion. Jasmine looked at him in surprise, trying to understand what was wrong with him and why he was behaving so strangely. Ignoring this question, Reina asked with genuine interest if they knew each other. Jasmine wanted to answer something, but Richard interrupted her again, saying that he studied with her older brother. The girl looked at him again with a dissatisfied look, asking herself why he didn't let her say even a word. The princess nodded her head, making it clear that she understood everything, but she was interested in completely different details. Without hiding her interest, she said that she had heard that there were conversations between them about marriage. Opening her fan, she added that now he speaks as if he is not close to her at all, but quite the opposite. Lowering his head, Richard briefly replied that he was simply unworthy of her, and that was the only fault for his behavior. Such a serious statement was reflected on Jasmine's face, who lost her breath for a second at these words. Taking a new glass, Reina asked if he decided to be her lawyer today, because he wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise. After all, she almost thought that Jasmine was already his bride, and now he took upon himself the voice of the head of the family. Hearing this, the girl immediately blushed, while the guy standing next to her just put his hand on his temple. Suddenly, they heard the nearby guests begin to whisper that Richard had rejected her proposal. They asked each other why the crown princess decided to ask them this in the middle of the hall. At that same second, Jasmine began to tremble. Richard was the first to draw his attention to this, straightening his tie. He then told Reina that she was going overboard, but the girl just smiled, closing her eyes in a relaxed manner. Playing with the glass, the princess asked what she said, because it was just an innocent joke. But still, she decided to ask Jasmine if she had ruined her mood. She just bit her lip. Having overcome her feelings, the girl smiled, barely able to contain herself, and then replied that she was fine. Satisfied with this answer, Reina asked Richard not to interfere in anyone else's conversation anymore. Through her sweet smile, Jasmine asked herself why she had to stand here and endure this in front of everyone. And why is she forced to stand between these two powerful people and listen to everything, although this is not what she came for? When suddenly she turned around, out of the corner of her eye noticing Charles, who was standing to the side and did not take his eyes off her. Looking at the guy in surprise, the girl continued to ask herself why everything turned out this way. A couple of days ago, Charles finally fulfilled his promise and brought Jasmine to his mansion for a walk. While examining the surroundings, the girl said that it was very beautiful here. The guy replied that he knew that she would like it. When they arrived at the villa, everything was simply amazing. A well-kept garden, polite servants, and delicious food. Jasmine thought that today was the best day she had ever spent with Charles until she heard something. The young man was visited by two friends who appeared out of nowhere with not particularly pleasant news. They immediately started saying that the owner of the neighboring villa had arrived, and they were talking about the crown princess. She had graceful manners and an impeccable retinue, and there are already rumors in the palace that they want to tell. They also stated that she came with Duke Aion. Hearing this news, Jasmine froze. The guy said that there were also the second sons of Count Kane and Count Yun, and we should take a closer look at them from the good side. At that same second, the girl rose from her seat, declaring that she wanted to take a little walk alone. Hearing such a sudden statement, Charles immediately offered to accompany her, to which he received a sharp refusal. She suggested that he talk to his friends, because he wanted to be alone. Then she went towards the garden. Only now she realized that she shouldn't come here, because it was here that she heard the name that she wants to forget. She feels like she's being terrible to Charles, and she doesn't even like him as a companion. Looking at the red roses, Jasmine thought that she should return home, asking to be taken back. Meanwhile, Charles's friends said that he was doing well with her since she came here with him. Then a question was heard that he could soon become a son-in-law, but the guy did not quite understand what was being said. However, he immediately stated that this could offend her, so he asked his friends not to talk like that in her presence. Approaching them, Jasmine purely by chance heard one of the guys ask if they were dating. I don't know that he was being overheard. The guy said that since she came, she could stay here for one night. Hearing these words, the girl froze, trying to understand what he just said and whether she understood him correctly. At that same second, Charles shuddered, loudly asking his comrade not to dare to insult her because she is far from like that. The guy asked him to calm down, explained that he didn't want to offend her. He just thought that such a turn was possible. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the voice of Jasmine, who in a trembling voice asked what his comrade was thinking about. Charles immediately stopped short, while the girl said that she was interested in hearing what thoughts she came here with. The guy who put forward such a proposal immediately began to hiccup, justifying himself by saying that this was not what he meant. However, the girl abruptly interrupted him, saying that she simply could not help but praise his courage and self-confidence. Looking at him with a cold and intimidating gaze, she asked how he dared to say such dirty words. She suddenly turned to Charles, who immediately flinched, having no idea what she wanted to tell him. Jasmine said that she wanted to give him friendly advice that one should also be able to choose comrades. Depending on who he meets, his class and place in society can change dramatically. Then she asked if he knew that swans and crows were not destined to be friends. This question frightened the guy. Having received no answer, Jasmine announced that she was returning, asking Charles not to accompany her. She thought again that she shouldn't have come here in the first place, but no one can change the past. Watching his companion move further and further away, Charles clenched his fist tightly and wanted to call her back. Suddenly, he was interrupted by the voice of a maid, who ran to the girl, announcing that she had received an invitation. With a confused and incomprehensible look, Jasmine decided to clarify what kind of invitation she had received and from whom. The maid pointed to the envelope, saying that it was from the Jade Villa, and the invitation was sent by the Crown Princess. Without thinking twice, Jasmine decided to accept the invitation, and after some time she arrived at the place. At that same second, the Crown Princess came out to her, greeting her and saying that she had been waiting for her for a very long time. A smiling Reina extended her hand, saying that this was their first time meeting her in an informal meeting. Kissing her hand in a respectful gesture, Jasmine replied that she was very happy to welcome the star of their empire. The princess replied that she was also glad and really wanted to meet, and since she was nearby, she decided to call. She hoped it wasn't wasting her precious time. Jasmine replied that she was honored. Richard suddenly approached them, and Reina said that she really wanted to meet her, so she decided to invite her. And he began to dissuade her, asking her not to create inconvenience for her and to respect her personal space. Jasmine was stunned when she saw in front of her a man whom she'd been trying not to think about all this time. The princess said that he is usually taciturn, but today he said more than he had spoken in a year. Richard Aion has imperial blood, has strong influence in the south, and maintains strict neutrality. Therefore, it was unanimously decided that marrying her would be beneficial for the imperial family. And now the girl watched how this guy carefreely communicated with the crown princess without looking at her. Jasmine thought that since they were cousins, they could make fun of each other. At that very moment, Reina apologized, deciding that she had embarrassed her because she just wanted to make fun of him while she could. The princess said that she could relax. It was very beautiful here, so she could spend time with peace of mind. Suggesting they rest, Reina added that the two of them could talk. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to find out anything about each other. She then walked away, leaving Richard alone with Jasmine, and there was a pause in the air for the next few seconds. Suddenly, the guy decided to apologize, saying that it seemed to him that because of him, she was having unnecessary troubles. He then suggested that she was spending time with her lover. This phrase stunned the girl. Suddenly, she froze, wondering how he even knew about this if she hadn't told anyone. At the same second, another carriage arrived, from which Charles slowly emerged, surprising Jasmine with his appearance. Frowning at the guy, she did not notice that Richard was literally piercing him with an angry gaze. When they entered the estate, Richard decided to give Jasmine a tour, showing what was where. Periodically glancing at the guy, the girl kept asking herself what it was a minute ago. After all, when she looked from Charles to Richard, saying that she was not the only one invited, she immediately froze. She caught her breath when she noticed the guy's intimidating gaze directed at the visiting guest. He looked very angry, but the girl decided that they had some kind of family disagreement that she was not aware of. She was pulled out of her thoughts by Richard's voice, who said that it was not appropriate for him to ask about this, but he would take the risk. He noticed that she had few things, so it was unlikely that she had come here with the intention of staying long. Jasmine replied that she originally came here for one day, so she wanted to refuse the princess's offer. The guy said that there was a large forest and many lakes in the vicinity, so next time she should bring clothes. When suddenly he asked if her lover had warned her about this in advance, Jasmine did not have time to answer. Stopping, she said that he was talking about her lover outside. Did he really mean Charles? Clarifying that he was just a friend to her, Richard said that he decided that the rumors that were circulating in society were true. Jasmine was surprised that such rumors were even circulating, but the guy clarified that people were saying this about her. It seemed absurd to her because they all live dissolute lives, denying themselves nothing. And they themselves spread rumors only because she drank tea with him a couple of times, and she never even kissed him. Jasmine asked not to give any importance to this, because soon the rumors will disappear as quickly as they appeared. She will not deny herself something for fear of what other people will think about her decisions. Suddenly, Richard turned to her, thereby forcing the girl to turn around and look in his direction. Looking into his indifferent face, she blushed, carefully waiting for what he wanted to tell her or ask her. Contrary to expectations, the guy lowered his head, saying that he would walk her to the room, after which he took her hand. This gesture made Jasmine flinch, watching closely as Richard showed politeness. Unable to withstand such pressure, she pulled her hand, thanking him, and saying that she could manage without his help. With a quick step, Jasmine headed towards her room, leaving the guy standing alone in the corridor. After some time, the girl changed clothes and stood in front of the mirror, immersed in her thoughts. With a flushed face, she thought that she still could not calm down because of what had happened recently. Richard did the same things as other men who tried to flirt with her, but there was something different. Then she told herself that she was just exaggerating everything. She needed to come to her senses as quickly as possible. Suddenly, she was distracted by her dress, thinking that it was absolutely in her style and looked great on her. The letter said that everything was already prepared for her, so she should come and have a good time. Jasmine understood that they definitely wrote to her for a reason, but she didn't know if there was something else. Looking at her reflection, the girl wondered how long Her Highness had been planning their meeting. An hour later, Jasmine sat opposite the princess, playing cards, and realized that she had lost again. The girl was shocked that she could never win against Reina, no matter how hard she tried to play her cards. She stated that Her Highness could not be defeated. She replied that she was more than confident in herself at cards. When a new game began, Jasmine carefully examined her cards, wanting to defeat her at least once. Noticing the 10 of hearts, she decided to play with this card, and was already preparing to take it out of her sleeve. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her that said that if she wanted to win, she should leave her. Turning around, the girl noticed Richard, who, noticing her sleeve, said that she needed to throw another card. At that second, she forgot about the game, without taking her eyes off the guy who appeared at such an unexpected moment. Having regained her composure, the girl turned her head away, displeasedly asking why she should listen to him. Taking a seat next to her, Richard smugly replied that he had never lost at cards at the military academy. Jasmine said that he is quite perceptive, but she is not so good and has no idea what the man is up to. Despite hundreds of attempts, she never succeeded. The guy said that it was not necessary to learn this. Changing her facial expression to a dejected one, the girl hardly thought she could use this skill, because it is very useful. Suddenly, Reina entered the conversation, asking if Richard wanted to join the game, helping her win. He constantly refused when she offered to play, so she would only be glad if he joined. At this moment, Jasmine did not understand what was wrong with him, and why he was acting as if he was planning something unclean. The guy sitting at the table with them said that playing with Duke Aion brought back memories from the academy. The last word was with the princess, who suggested that they start the game as soon as possible and stop chattering in vain. The next few minutes passed in suspense, and Richard explained in detail to Jasmine which card was best to use. When everything began to work out for her, a smile reigned on the girl's face, which she decided to share with the guy. After this, their faces became serious as they decided to join forces to defeat the princess. As the game came to an end, Reina closed her eyes that this time Lady Leavanti was still able to win. Hearing this news, Jasmine's face froze in surprise and delight, because for the first time, she was able to beat the princess. Unable to contain her emotions, the girl turned her head to Richard, saying that she could not believe that she had won. Giving him a high five, she happily announced that she had won this game for the first time, in response to which the guy smiled slightly. The princess, watching them carefully, said that the two of them looked absolutely beautiful next to each other. Startled, and remembering that they were not alone here, Richard embarrassedly asked Reina not to make such statements. Suddenly, Jasmine jumped up from her seat, saying that she felt a little stuffy and would go for a walk. Smiling, she apologized, and the guy, looking after her, thought that now she looked rather pitiful. Going outside, the girl thought that she began to rejoice and smile at him because he helped a little. At this moment, she wanted to quickly return home, but she did not notice how someone approached her from behind. Hearing the appeal, she noticed Charles, who called out to her and said that 1 minute was enough for him. Blushing, the guy with a guilty look asked to give him some of your time before it was too late. Frowning, Jasmine replied that if he wanted to apologize about that conversation, then he shouldn't. The guy said that he should not have allowed the topic to be broached regarding her, so he should apologize to her. Clenching his fist tightly, Charles added that he did not want to remain in her memory as an unworthy and vile man. Looking down, he concluded that perhaps it was selfish of him, but still decided to apologize. After all, if he thought about it, he realized that he had never said these words to her, but now it was time to fix it. Smiling, Charles looked into her eyes, quietly saying that he liked her very much, like no one else. The guy explained that this happened back when, at some party, she performed a serenade on the piano. Then he stood closest to her, watching with delight the girl so enthusiastically playing a beautiful song. It was then that she became his first love. When Jasmine finished, Charles applauded the loudest. After some time, the girl was sitting in the banquet hall and drinking. When her glass was empty, she demanded more. Looking at Jasmine's condition, the guy who was the waiter tried to explain that she had had enough. The girl herself firmly decided that this was not enough, but she asked for some water, and the servant immediately followed her. With her head down, she thought about Charles's recent confession, and still didn't know how to react to it. The picture of his confession was reproduced in her head again and again, because she did not expect such a revelation. Then the guy looked so innocent and sincere because he doesn't know that Jasmine doesn't have any feelings for him. It seemed that he felt better after confessing, but the girl was unable to give her answer, leaving him confused. The girl suddenly asked herself if she had confessed her feelings to Richard at least once and sincerely. Covering her mouth with her fingers, Jasmine thought that she had never tried it, which is why she suffered for several years in a row. Moreover, it is wrong to remember a completely different person after hearing a confession from Charles. She, too, like him, wants to talk openly about her feelings at least once, in order to make it easier. At a tea party a couple of years ago, Nikki was surprised that she still hadn't found the strength to confess to Richard. With a dissatisfied look, Jasmine asked if it was so easy, to which she heard the answer to the question, "Why is it hard?" She just needed to say about it, and that's it. Otherwise, she would continue to suffer because of unrequited love. Suddenly, Aion said that not only did she sleep with someone, she probably didn't even kiss the man. And when, in addition, Jasmine was called a child, the girl's face was full of shock from such a statement. And now she asked not to look down on her, because she too could confess and take her first step. At that same second, the girl jumped up from her seat, deciding that she too could confess and go further. She remembered Richard's words that he could not leave her in this state, because something dangerous could happen. Not caring about what was happening around, Jasmine said that she would show him how dangerous she could be. At that same second, the waiter approached her, announcing with a smile on his face that he had brought water, but she did not hear him. He tried to understand what was happening with the mistress, but the girl did not respond to any appeals addressed to her. Meanwhile, Richard stood on the balcony, talking with the crown princess, who tried to call out to him. After several unsuccessful attempts, Reina became angry, asking if he had started ignoring her outright. When asked what she wanted, the girl asked with interest what happened between him and the Archduke's daughter.